Welcome back to another book highlight. We have reached chapter 21, so this is where David gets the chance he's been looking for all this time to escape the Philistines without making it look like he's betraying their king, Achish. They're marching into battle against Israel now, and David was hoping to turn on the Philistines in the heat of battle and save Saul and Jonathan and their army somehow. But it's been getting tricky. The other Philistine commanders have been watching David and his men very closely, and he's been feeling trapped, and now he has a chance to get away. King Achish gave in to his men and sent David off, so now David has the chance to rally his men and make a more concrete plan separate from the Philistines without them constantly watching him. So David is thrilled. We talked about how he was so burdened in the last chapter about this problem, but now he doesn't have to break cover or fight with Achish. They plan to head back to their town at Ziklag that the Philistines gave them, pick up their families, maybe drop them off with people in Judah, and then head out to the battle. So things are finally looking up. David feels like I am finally free from that big burden of being a double agent, and I can help my people, and maybe this will be the thing that catapults me into my kingship. But the chapter ends with David getting back to Ziklag and noticing that all their families had been captured by the Amalekites. Now, the Amalekites were another marauding enemy, and they were the ones that Saul was supposed to eradicate years earlier, but didn't in disobedience. So, of course, David and his men are devastated, and the chapter ends without resolution. But what can it say to us? If you've been following along, you might have noticed that the circumstances are just getting more and more intense and the situations more and more desperate. And all of the lessons in these chapters are kind of similar lessons, but they're building on each other, deeper layers, more and more intense and high stakes, which is how life often is. But here's what stands out to me in chapter 21. It's very easy to formulate our own elaborate plans. And we talked about how David's whole plan to join the Philistines in pretense and then turn around and help Saul, all of that in scripture doesn't seem to be something that was sanctioned by God. It doesn't seem to be something he inquired of the Lord about. And it's very easy to figure out, how am I going to fix things? How am I going to help those I love get out of a bad situation? And that's fine. I mean, we can lift up those plans to God. But it's easy to get so excited when our plan seems like it's going to work perfectly. There seems to be deliverance, and then our spirits come crashing down when something worse happens. Ever been in that kind of season where it keeps happening, where we're so desperate for breakthrough in a horrible circumstance, and then God rescues us and we're on top of the world, and then something worse hits us? When there's a succession of those, it can often plunge us into despair. We start to think, what Jonathan was thinking in the last chapter, was my life a waste? Did I mess up so bad that God doesn't want to help me anymore? And that's how David feels now. He feels like he led his people into disaster, and later his men want to stone him for that. In desperate times, it's easy to feel like, I'm done. I've failed enough. How long can this go on? How long can things keep getting worse and worse just when I think I found a way out? But the point I want to make here is that I think this chapter is highlighting for us is that in these desperate times, it's important that we not worship our own plans. Just because our plans were wrecked doesn't mean God's plans for us or for the bigger picture were wrecked. It's easy for us to think only about our situation and that things were wrecked according to our plans for just our minor future, but God has the bigger picture, and he sees how our life is connected to his bigger plan. So there is still hope even when our plans are shattered. A couple of years ago, I wrote about an article about Moses, a blog post about Moses called Breaking the Prince, and you can find that at jubileelipsy.com. And it was basically talking about how Moses' plans were shattered when he was banished from Egypt. He figured out, he was raised as a prince. He was figured out that his brothers, the Hebrews, were being oppressed, and he killed an Egyptian to save a Hebrew. Pharaoh banished him. What do you think he was thinking as he was, stumbling through the desert? Why was I rescued as an infant if I'm just going to be exiled and now I don't get to rescue my people? What was my life spared for if it's not going to fix the problem that I see in Egypt? But the thing is, he had to be broken. He had to meet with God in the wilderness and be broken enough to lean on God for something only God could accomplish. He had to learn that it was literally Yahweh or no way. when our plans are thwarted and we're so tired and discouraged because we didn't see another way around things. In our minds, our plan was it. And it's easy to turn our prayers into, God, just please agree with what I've already planned because it's the best way. But God's plan is bigger than ours, and it doesn't fail or falter. Later, we'll talk about how David specifically strengthens himself in God. But for now, I just want to remind you and encourage you that it isn't God's plans that have been wrecked. It's yours. And that seems harsh and intense, and God understands that. But God's character has not changed, and you can and should still find hope in him.